About 7 years ago, I had started navigating the world of online dating, trying to find something meaningful. Back then, I was pretty active on Tinder, going on dates and hoping to meet the right person. One of those encounters sticks out for all the wrong reasons. It was around 6 years ago when I matched with a woman named Chloe, and what I thought was going to be a great connection quickly turned into one of my worst dating experiences. Chloe's profile stood out from the rest. Unlike many users who barely filled out their information, she had taken the time to create an engaging bio. Her photos were appealing without seeming unrealistic, a refreshing change from the countless fake profiles I'd encountered. Even back then, the problem of fake accounts was prevalent, though I imagine it's only gotten worse since. We connected instantly. Chloe's messages revealed a sharp wit and intelligence, and we discovered we shared many common interests. The chemistry was evident, so we decided to meet up. She proposed a local bar in our city, and despite it being quite far from my place, I eagerly agreed. Anxiety crept in as I arrived at the bar on the day of our date. I scanned the room, looking for a brunette woman with blue eyes among the sparse crowd. Suddenly, there she was, walking through the door. Relief washed over me as I realized she looked exactly like her profile pictures. We exchanged smiles as I approached her, and soon we were seated with drinks in hand. Time seemed to fly by as we chatted. Our conversation felt natural and engaging, as if we'd known each other for years. I couldn't believe how well the date was going, and I found myself getting more excited as we continued to talk and laugh. After a couple of hours of drinks and great conversation, Chloe surprised me with a suggestion. She invited me back to her place to continue our date. The walk to Chloe's place took about 20 minutes, and we kept chatting effortlessly throughout. She lived in a quiet, decent neighborhood, and the house was modest, with a small front yard and simple exterior. Nothing too fancy, but comfortable enough. Inside, the space was cozy, with soft lighting and a comfortable-looking couch where we sat down. Chloe turned on some light music, offered me a beer, and I accepted as we continued our conversation, feeling like the night was going smoothly. Then Chloe suddenly set her drink aside and stood up. With a sly smile, she told me to relax and enjoy what was about to happen, with a teasing look in her eyes. Then, to my surprise, she slowly began unbuttoning her top while moving to the music, which I assumed was the start of a striptease. Just as I was thinking all my Christmases had come at once, the front door suddenly burst open, and a woman in her mid-30s stormed in. She was short but intimidating, with fiery short red hair and a furious expression. At first, I assumed this must be Chloe's friend or roommate. The woman started yelling at Chloe in a language I didn't understand, completely ignoring my presence. Chloe began crying and yelling back in the same language. I sat there, frozen and confused, until the older woman turned to me and switched to English, demanding to know who the hell I was and why I was there alone with Chloe. Before I could even respond, the argument between them escalated quickly, and I was still trying to make sense of what was going on. Suddenly, the woman turned toward me again, furiously declaring that she was Chloe's girlfriend, telling me to leave at once, while pointing at the front door. The moment she said it, everything became crystal clear. There was no need for further explanation. I realized I had just been implanted straight into the middle of their relationship drama. Chloe's girlfriend moved toward me, demanding I hurry up and leave immediately. She then threw open the door, making it absolutely obvious that I should never return and forget the address entirely. Even as I reached the street, I could still hear her shouting insults and expletives at me. I ran down the street until I was sure I wasn't being followed by her angry girlfriend, then called for a rideshare to take me home. During the ride, my thoughts swirled in frustration and disbelief. Maybe she wanted to make her girlfriend jealous or stir up more trouble between them. Whatever her reasons, I couldn't shake the feeling of being manipulated. Like I was just a pawn in their drama, with no regard for how it might affect me. Once I was back home, I decided to block Chloe on all platforms and deleted my dating apps. The experience left me wary of online dating for months. In fact, I didn't go on another date, online or otherwise, for almost a year after that incident. When I finally felt ready to try again, I opted for meeting people through mutual friends instead of apps. Ironically, that's how I met my current partner, at a board game night organized by a coworker. I met this guy called Joshua on Tinder. Joshua had a charming and witty way with words, making our online connection feel effortless. In person, he was tall and lean, with curly brown hair and a relaxed smile that put me at ease, just like he looked on his profile. Good first sign, or so I thought. We'd been chatting for about a week when Joshua suggested meeting up. Our first date was at a bar in downtown Houston. The conversation flowed, and I found myself drawn to his quick wit and stories. By the end of the night, I wanted to see him again. A few days later, Joshua asked for a second date. He said his car was at the mechanics and asked if I could pick him up. I agreed, thinking it was a chance to return the favor since he'd driven last time. On Saturday night, I pulled up to Joshua's apartment complex. He came out looking even more handsome than I remembered. We decided to try a new restaurant on the outskirts of the city. Dinner was great, full of laughter and stories. As we left, the streets were nearly empty. I turned onto a main road, heading back to Joshua's place. That's when I noticed the car behind us. It was following closely, almost bumper to bumper. I switched lanes, thinking they'd pass, but they stayed right on our tail. I commented on how close the car was driving. Joshua turned to look and suggested maybe they thought I'd cut them off at the last intersection. I didn't remember cutting anyone off, but it was possible I hadn't seen them in the dark. I switched lanes again, hoping they'd go around, but they matched my move. I expressed my confusion about the driver's behavior. Joshua suggested turning down a side street to see if they'd follow. I did, and the car was still behind us. My heart raced. I took another turn, then another, trying to shake them off. But no matter where we went, the car stayed right behind us. I told Joshua that I was scared and asked him what I should do. He suggested finding a well-lit area to pull over so he could talk to them. I hesitated, questioning if it was safe. Joshua assured me he could handle himself and told me to stay in the car and lock the doors. I spotted a well-lit stretch of road with a wide shoulder and pulled over. The other car stopped right behind us. Before Joshua could get out, the driver of the other car jumped out. In my side mirror, I saw him clearly under the streetlights. A stocky man with a shaved head, looking angry. Joshua got out of the car, telling me to stay put. I watched in the mirrors as Joshua approached the man. They started arguing, their voices raised but too muffled for me to hear. Suddenly, the bald man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small knife. I reached for my phone to call 911, but before I could, Joshua moved quickly. He knocked the knife from the man's hand and followed up with a series of strikes. The man stumbled back, clearly outmatched. Within seconds, Joshua had him on the ground and kicked the knife far away, like you see in the movies. The whole thing was over in less than a minute. Joshua left the man on the ground and calmly walked back to my car, as if it was nothing. He got in without looking back. The man struggled to his feet and stumbled back to his car, then drove off. I asked if he was okay. Joshua said he was fine and that the man wouldn't bother us again. When I asked how he did that, Joshua explained he had extensive martial arts training. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. I drove Joshua home, still processing what had happened. He acted like it was no big deal. When I dropped him off, he gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and said he'd call me soon. The next few days passed quickly. I was supposed to head out on a business trip, so when Joshua texted a couple of times asking how I was doing and if we could meet up, I told him I was fine and we'd get together again once I returned. He seemed understanding and said he was looking forward to it. However, just as I was about to leave, my trip got canceled at the last minute. I figured I'd surprise Joshua later that day and catch up with him sooner than expected. But before I had the chance to tell him, something strange happened. That afternoon, I stopped to grab a coffee near my work. And as I walked in, I saw them. Joshua sitting at a corner table, laughing and chatting with the bald man from the other night. They looked like old friends, deep in conversation, and it made me freeze in my tracks. I realized the whole thing had been staged. The road rage, the confrontation, all of it. Joshua had set it up to look like a hero. I left without being seen, my mind racing. I wondered why someone would go to such lengths to impress a date, and what else Joshua had lied about. At home, I blocked Joshua's number and unmatched him on Tinder. I briefly considered reporting him, but didn't know what to say. It sounded unbelievable, even to me. What I thought was a perfect match turned out to be a match made in hell. I began using Tinder back in the early days, around 2014. Looking back, I can't help but partially blame myself for what happened later. You see, on my Tinder profile, I'd gone a bit overboard trying to appear wealthier than I really was. I had photos in front of a rented Ferrari, standing by a yacht that wasn't mine, and pretending to be on a private jet that was just a prop for photos. At the end of the day, though, I was just a regular Joe. This story begins with me matching this stunningly beautiful young woman named Helen. Our initial messages led to a suggestion to meet in person. Helen agreed, which led me to offer my phone number so we could coordinate more easily. However, Helen insisted that we keep all communication on the platform until after the date, explaining that she wanted to feel comfortable before giving out her number. Understandable, I thought. Safety first. It seemed like a reasonable request, and I respected her caution. A quaint coffee shop downtown became Helen's suggested meeting spot. Arriving 15 minutes early, I found the place closed for the day. Monday evening at 7 p.m. explained the shutdown. My message to Helen about the closure received a quick reply. She recommended a bar just a block away, mentioning that it was close to her home and that she would be there soon. She urged me to hurry, as she was eager to meet me, and even suggested a shortcut through a nearby alleyway to get there faster. The walk towards the new location revealed a poorly lit, deserted alley. Hesitating briefly, I decided to take the shortcut, not wanting to keep Helen waiting. The alley was narrow and dark, with only a faint glow from distant streetlights. Halfway through, two masked men emerged from the shadows, brandishing knives. Before I could react, one man grabbed me from behind, while the other held a knife to my throat. The man with the knife sneered, telling me,
"Helen sends her love, loser."
They demanded my wallet, watch, and phone. Shocked and terrified, I complied without resistance. My expensive watch, a gift from my parents, was roughly yanked off my wrist. They rifled through my pockets, taking everything of value. The muggers shoved me to the ground and disappeared as quickly as they'd appeared. Shaken and bruised, I picked myself up, realizing the gravity of what had just happened. Helen had set me up. I've been on and off Tinder for about 3 years now. I've experimented with other dating apps too, but Tinder was my go-to choice. I vividly recall stumbling upon her profile for the first time. Her bio was clever and engaging, sure, but it was her photos that truly blew my mind. There were plenty of beautiful women on Tinder, but she was on a whole different level. Tall, slim, tanned, with blonde hair and striking features, she looked like a Nordic queen. In my opinion, she was way above and beyond anyone else. I swiped right and set my phone aside for the evening, not really expecting anything to happen. After all, she was easily an 11 out of 10, and I'd rate myself, on my best day, maybe a 7. I'm balding for starters, and pimples have taken up residence on my face, like unwanted squatters. Most women wouldn't look twice at me, but when I'm on stage with my guitar, everything changes. My music is what usually grabs women's attention. It's the one thing that makes me stand out. I'm someone who hates notifications on my phone, so I keep them turned off for almost everything. As a result, it wasn't until the next afternoon when I opened the Tinder app that I was ecstatic to see we had matched. We started messaging right away, and I was instantly captivated by her intelligence, sharp sense of humor, and charm. Our exchanges felt natural and engaging as we shared stories about our interests, careers, and backgrounds. Not only was she stunning, but she was also funny and intelligent. I had hit the trifecta, or so I thought. The connection was instantaneous, leading us to arrange a meetup at a local bookstore cafe. Of course, I couldn't shake the nagging worry that this might be too good to be true. Maybe she was a catfish, using old or heavily filtered photos, and I was just setting myself up for disappointment. But the moment I laid eyes on her, all my doubts vanished. She was tall and slim, with flowing blonde hair, but even more stunning than her pictures suggested. We embraced, ordered our drinks, and lost ourselves in conversation about the most trivial things. We hit it off right away, but as the date went on, I couldn't shake the creeping feeling of imposter syndrome, like I wasn't good enough for someone as perfect as her. Still, I was already looking forward to our next encounter. We began seeing each other more frequently, exploring the city's hidden gems together. We visited art galleries, tried out quirky food trucks, and spent hours in the city's numerous parks, simply enjoying each other's company. We shared our aspirations, anxieties, uncertainties, and plans for the future. I felt I'd found someone who truly got me, someone who made me feel wanted. But as time progressed, things started to shift. She'd text me constantly, even when she knew I was at band practice or hanging out with my buddies. If my response wasn't immediate, she'd become upset and accuse me of neglecting her or cheating on her. I know most guys, myself included before all this, would go to great lengths for a woman like her. But once you get past the surface, it became clear that beauty alone can't sustain a relationship. Her insecurities slowly turned what seemed like a dream into a nightmare. She began showing up at my house unannounced, even when I had prior commitments. Initially, I interpreted this as a sign of her affection, her way of showing how much she cared, but it soon became overwhelming and claustrophobic. When I tried to discuss it with her, she'd become defensive and irate, accusing me of flirting with other girls and not truly caring about her. She'd even ask if she wasn't hot enough for me, throwing out those irrational questions that only deep-rooted insecurity could fuel, no matter how stunning someone might be. None of her accusations held any truth, and it felt like she was living in an alternate reality where I was her sole source of happiness and purpose. I felt like I was constantly treading on thin ice around her, unable to do anything without feeling guilty or anxious. Her calls and messages became exhausting, and I began to dread them. I felt like I couldn't have any time to myself, catch up with my friends, or pursue my own interests. One afternoon, she showed up at the music store where I worked part-time and caused a commotion. When I attempted to ask her to leave, my co-workers had to intervene and escort her out. It was mortifying. Thankfully, my manager was understanding and just advised me to take a breather and compose myself. I was relieved that the incident didn't cost me my job. After that episode, I realized I had to end our relationship. I tried to break it off gently over a video call, but she refused to accept it. She pleaded for another chance, swearing she'd change and never repeat such behavior, but deep down, I knew things wouldn't improve. I needed to extricate myself from the situation before it escalated further. Then the barrage of messages intensified. At first, her texts were desperate and pleading, professing her love and need for me. However, they quickly morphed into angry threats, accusing me of leading her on and betraying her. She'd send me screenshots of my social media posts with my friends, saying things like, "I see what you're up to," and "I'm always watching." She'd turn up at places she knew I frequented, trying to catch me off guard. I was terrified and at a loss. I tried blocking her number, but she'd just get new ones. I made all my social media accounts private, but somehow she still managed to view my posts. Even when I approached the police, they said their hands were tied unless she physically harmed me. The situation was maddening. One evening, as I was strumming my guitar in my living room, I heard a disturbance outside my house. When I peered out the window, I saw her standing there, staring up at me. Panic-stricken, I secured all the doors and windows before calling the police. She began hammering on the door, attempting to force it open. When the police arrived, they found her intoxicated and causing a scene. After repeatedly warning her to stop, they had no choice but to arrest her for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. She spent the night in custody. She was released the following day, but due to the incident, I was eventually granted a restraining order. After that, the situation improved significantly, though I never discovered what sparked the change. Perhaps it was the fear of legal repercussions, or maybe her loved ones intervened. Whatever the reason, I'm grateful that things didn't worsen. It's been about 18 months since that night, and while things have calmed down considerably, I still feel a sense of unease. My band has been a great source of support throughout all of this. Throwing myself into our music has been therapeutic, and we're starting to gain a bit of a following in the local indie scene. It's given me something positive to focus on and a reason to look forward. Maybe I'll write a song about this whole ordeal next, and who knows, you might see us at the top of the charts. But jokes aside, I know most men would have dreamt of being in my shoes, dating someone as stunning as her. Trust me though, it wasn't worth the price I ended up paying.